Welcome to the Irish NFL Show's Divisional Round Preview in association with our partner QuinBet. We look ahead to all four matchups on what is undisputedly the best football weekend of the year. We're also still very much looking forward to an upcoming event heading into Easter weekend when sadly there'll be no NFL games, but there will be a night out in Buskers on the Ball in Dublin's Temple Bar. That's March 28th with Peter King of NBC, writer of the legendary Football Morning in America column, of course, and a regular guest every NFL Sunday on Sky Sports on this side of the Atlantic and on Pro Football Talk Live. Tickets are available via the link, which you'll find across all the Irish NFL shows, social channels, including X and on Instagram. Well, we'll have the game picks coming up shortly, but it remains a busy news season in the NFL as well, of course, especially for the teams who are already eliminated from the playoffs as the coaching carousel continues to spin. Brian, let's start with the Belichick to Falcons, which now looks like a distinct possibility. Bill has a second interview. I don't know, are they interviewing Bill Belichick or is Bill Belichick interviewing the Falcons?
Probably a combination of both, I would have thought. No, bearing in mind what Bill has had to endure over the past 2 years. Look, I think they want to obviously recognise this. Bill probably has other alternatives and he may be keeping his options open, but ultimately is this approach and potential offering of the role the right fit for everybody? Like we've seen in the past, it looks like it makes sense on paper, and then 6 weeks later, or 6 months later, we quickly realised it was a bad decision, i.e. Frank Reich going into Carolina, for example. I believe from reading reports that the first interview was very light touch. It was more about both of them sounding each other out in terms of what their expectation is for the role and vice versa. And obviously the owner, who was no spring chicken, obviously he wants to see his team succeed before he departs the world, shall we say. He's hitting over 80. But the second interview they've suggested, I suppose this is probably the norm in the NFL industry, is that it's going to be a lot more detailed in terms of what his aspirations are, in terms of his responsibility within the organization, who he can bring in, who he can't, what his plans are, from an offensive and defensive standpoint, in terms of who he wants to bring in as part of his background staff. All of that is to be carried out, and there's supposed to be 4 people from the Falcons stepping into the interview, not just the owner. So it sounds to me like, we spoke about it on Monday, but it sounds like it's a done deal. Nothing else really strikes me. I think the news that's come out over the course of the last 24 hours, and we're going to get to it, around the Eagles and the Cowboys, was the Eagles haven't confirmed it looks like that Sirianni is returning. I think that kind of puts Belichick in a position where it's either the West Coast or Atlantic, because I just don't know. He doesn't seem to be in shape for Washington. They dismissed it immediately, and Tennessee don't seem to be making any inroads to bring them down. So I think it is the Falcons. I don't think Colin rightly called it a few weeks ago. It doesn't seem like the kind of coach that would want to go out to the West Coast. So this one might make sense, because I think the division is very much there and open to be won next year, despite the Bucs' success in the playoffs.
Well, let's be fair here, Colin. There's a reason why Tom Brady went to the NFC South. It wasn't just because Tampa Bay is a lovely place and they were, in fairness, primed to win with a good coach. It's also because it's probably the easiest division in football to qualify for the playoffs from. And Belichick knows that every bit as well as Tom Brady knew it.
Yeah, but you need a quarterback. And what's their answer going to be? I mean, this is the problem. Bill Belichick, the coach, fantastic. Bill Belichick, the GM. Has anyone said within the last 10 years? It is. I heard this stat the other day. This is incredible. They have given a second contract to the draft, the draft pick, once since 2013. That is insane. And this is why I don't know why they're going down this route. I would, if you parachute Bill Belichick in with a really good quarterback, happy days, right? The offense can kind of take care of itself. But to me, he's going to have to find a quarterback.
Well, to be fair, the team that won that division is still in the playoffs, and people were saying, "Oh, Baker Mayfield, you win nothing with him."
But at least Baker, there are issues. There are an awful lot of issues with Baker. But at least Baker had the talent to go in the first round and first overall. He shouldn't have gone first overall. But I just think, I don't know. I wonder about it. I wonder, are we going to see, is it just that they're kind of giving him all the power in the world again? The best thing Bill Belichick could have done was to go into a situation where he wasn't being the GM, where he was being the head coach. I had hoped maybe Bill had learned. Maybe he has. We'll get to details in the fullness of time. But I think this idea that you are a quarterback away a lot of the time, you're never just a quarterback away. And you mentioned Tom Brady there, Connor. Let's remember the fact that it's always worth reminding people that it wasn't just that Tom Brady went in there. Gronk went with him.
Leonard Fournette.
One of the greats. Fournette back when he
Antonio
was
Brown. When he was Antonio Brown.
And then they also drafted Tristan Wirfs, who has looked like an all-pro from the day he walked on to an NFL field. Oh, and Anton Winfield Jr., another absolute superstar. They had Mike Evans there at the time as well. So, yeah, I don't see that for the Falcons. But look, you roll the dice, you take your chances.
Brian, Mike Vrabel interviewing with the Chargers. I like this fit, I have to say. If you're talking about a team that's got a lot of talent, that's underperformed, particularly defensively, considering the personnel they have, that has the quarterback, you bring in the guy who guys play for.
Absolutely. It's a strong-minded head coach. Obviously, we've seen the differences in Tennessee and how difficult he took the A.J. Brown trade. But he's obviously a coach that wants to have a lot of input in not just around, obviously, managing the team, but managing expectations around what players he thinks should be brought in. And that'll be interesting to see because there's no GM there right now. Let's bear that in mind. They haven't signed up to a GM, so it's interesting that they're doing the coaching carousel first. Usually, normally in these situations, it's a GM hired, and then they sit down and make a decision on the head coach. It could be an interesting twist if they decide on the head coach before they decide on a GM, and they parachute him in there after. Will he work with Vrabel? Or maybe Vrabel is going down the Belichick route, which essentially is he's going in to say, I'll take care of everything. Leave it to me. I believe there's the ownership of difference of opinion. I think seems to be a general disconnect in the ownership there in terms of the family around how they should proceed with running the Chargers organization. That's come out this week in the forefront as well. That's a difficulty there. So I thought Harbaugh was the one that was the lock for that particular role. But the fact that they're bringing Vrabel in doesn't strike me as the we see, and we obviously talk about the Rooney rule. We're seeing certain coaches getting opportunities for interviews. And with all due respect, I think we already know that this is just a part of the process. But with Vrabel going in there, I think that's going to move the goalposts around Harbaugh potentially getting the job, because I think Vrabel might go in and impress him so much that he will get the job.
We've also, Colm, seen an interview in Chicago. They're now interviewing, it seems like, their sixth offensive coordinator, Cliff Kingsbury, the man who's rumored to be getting put through his paces there now, ex-head coach of the Arizona Cardinals, of course, more recently, and this is probably the more interesting part of the story, with the USC. So he of the quarterback whispering into Caleb Williams' ear fame, which has amped up the buzz around the prospect that the Bears will be moving off Justin Fields and using that number 1 overall pick to draft Caleb Williams and potentially bringing Cliff Kingsbury with them, the two-for deal.
Potentially, though, and Brian mentioned, like, it seems to me that teams are getting bolder and bolder around the Rooney Rule stuff, and the fact that even Schefter essentially called it out earlier on today when he said, publicly that they've now, essentially met the Rooney Rule criteria. They're now in compliance with the Rooney Rule about the Chargers interviewing David Shaw. I think that, maybe if Harbaugh gets the job, Shaw could potentially be an OC. There was talk about the Broncos there last year. I'm wondering if we're seeing something in a sort of a way with the Bears and Cliff, in that they're bringing him in just to find out about Caleb. Give us some intel there, Cliff. And they actually have no real intention of hiring him as the OC.
Colm, I wish and hope that the Bears are actually doing that, but experience has taught me that the Bears will do nothing quite so smart as that. They may actually hire him on the... So, considering, to be fair, they've actually interviewed some pretty good candidates for this job. You got the likes of Clint Kubiak, the San Francisco 49ers passing game coordinator, who'd be stepping up, but who looks eminently capable given what that offense has done this year. Shane Waldron, Seahawks offensive coordinator, who's done some great work there. There's a couple of good names been linked to it, and a couple of absolute flyers as well, including Liam Cohen, the Kentucky football OC. They've kind of fallen off a cliff this year. He seemed like a bit of a one-hit wonder. Kingsbury, to be fair, did some interesting things with Kyler, and it was going well in Arizona before it was going badly. He's clearly not head coach material. We've learned that lesson, or everybody should have learned that lesson. But yeah, let's hope at the very least that if they're interviewing him and they don't plan to hire him, that they're just going to, squeeze every knot of intel that they can out of him regarding Williams. But yeah, we shall see. They've done a lot of interviews there, as I say, some good, some bad, some kind of head scratchers, but they're kicking all the tires, that is for sure. And finally, Brian, and you touched on it earlier and teased ahead to it, two people who are staying put, but both interesting for their respective reasons. Nick Sirianni looks like he's staying with the Eagles, and Mike McCarthy already confirmed to be staying put with the Dallas Cowboys, which has attracted a lot of scorn in some quarters, but to be fair to Mike McCarthy, he knows how to win 12 games and get to the playoffs year in, year out.
Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised by the disgruntlement, to be honest. Like, yeah, they're 1-4 in the playoffs with him there, but over the course of his career, he's a 62% win rate. I was just looking at some of the numbers today in terms of comparing him to other coaches across the league in terms of their regular season careers. He's had 7 more wins than Sean Payton and 6 less than Tomlin. And he's had 7 more wins than John Harbaugh. He has 167 career wins, and 42 of which are with Dallas. He is a good head coach in his own right in terms of winning divisions and getting teams to the playoff. Obviously, the hump really is trying to make that move on. I was listening to a very interesting piece today. Say the great thing about McCarthy in Dallas is he doesn't challenge the owners. He does what he's told. He doesn't get involved. He allows Stephen Jones and the other people involved to pick the players, which is essentially how he was in Green Bay when God rest his soul, Thompson was there as GM. He basically left all that alone. So I'd imagine Jerry is probably conscious he doesn't want another coach to come in who's going to essentially look like Belichick or even Vrabel to be more involved. It's very much hands off. Leave us to get on with it.
I know you had a point you wanted to make on this column, but it is interesting, as Brian says, that the likes of Belichick, Vrabel, Pete Carroll, some of the other potential candidates, Harbaugh, they all looked a little bit like too much coach for Jerry to handle. Guys who might actually have their own opinions.
Yeah, that could be the case, but there, to Brian's point, that he doesn't understand disgruntlement, and that seems to be today's consensus. Richard Sherman and various others saying, "Why be careful what you wish for?" And the guy has a great regular season record, and why can't you all just accept that? Can I point to John Fox? And let's go John Fox with Peyton Manning. 13 and 3.
I got John Fox scars as well, Colin.
I know where this is going.
13 and 3, 13 and 3, 12 and 4. Oh, by the way, that second year, 13 and 3, the greatest offense that the NFL has ever seen. Scoring points for fun. Got to a Super Bowl. And the Broncos decided, nah, not good enough, John. Good luck. Brought in Gary Kubiak, won a Super Bowl. This notion that, careful what you wish for. Careful what you wish for if you stay put. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result.
You could say that, but counterpoint to this, Matt LaFleur is a genius. Matt LaFleur couldn't make the Super Bowl with Hall of Fame quarterback Aaron Rodgers. They had a glass ceiling in Green Bay. Like, there's a different narrative around Mike McCarthy.
But they made a change. Like, they got Aaron Rodgers is gone.
And if they win the Super Bowl, I will eat humble pie.
But the Cowboys are going to run the exact same thing back. Like, the talk today is if Dan Quinn doesn't get a head coaching job, Dan Quinn's coming back. Dak is going to get a contract extension. They're going to do the exact same thing again next year.
The Dak contract is because there's a $60 million cap hit in coming this year, and they're going to have to spread that out. There's no way around it if they want to be competitive and go into free agency. Like, that's a side story. Like, they have to move that contract. Like, that contract was bananas in the first place because they're putting themselves in cap hell immediately. Like, what are we going to look at? 237, 239, probably give or take, depending if the NFL increases it by a couple of million like they do every year. 60 million is owed to Dak. You can't live with that and try to be competitive. Sure.
Colin, let's not forget they let go of Zeke. Like, that's enough change for Jerry to make.
But Brian, you can say it's cap out, but the reality is they're going to extend Dak. So they're going to have the same head coach, the same quarterback, the same DC, who, and again, if it had just been that they'd been blown out once, fair enough. But this is a team who lost in embarrassing fashion. Like they
worst playoff
themselves,
loss in history.
right?
Worst playoff loss in history.
And the two previous playoff losses ended with some of the most ridiculous play calling you've ever seen in your life. Zeke at center. Like, how long does this continue to go on?
One more year. Tell you that for nothing.
When all your rivals,
we'll be sorry when he's gone.
When all your rivals basically go, yes, good job when you make a decision, I don't think that's a ringing endorsement of what you've chosen to do.
It's quick one on Dan Quinn is supposed to be getting 4 interviews. I can't recall the exact. I know Seattle obviously is one, and Carolina is another. I don't know where the other two are coming from, unless he's going for a lateral move elsewhere. But like the likelihood is he's going to get. I'd imagine he'll get one of those jobs. So when they're running it back, but I don't think they'll be running it back with Dan Quinn involved. I think he's definitely moving on. No, not convinced.
We shall see. Dallas has always been a hotbed of McCarthyism, says Luke Walsh. Excellent. Point of the evening so far. Right, let's move on to some game picks in association with RootPoint.com. Our first segment of picks is brought to you by RootPoint, demonstrating the value of global PR and comms. You can see how RootPoint can help your business at RootPoint.com. Just to recap on the story so far, Brian and Colin, with the playoff predictions. So in reverse order, poor old Aidan had a bit of a Dallas at the weekend. Aidan went 0-6. It was all too much from the questions didn't suit him, as Larry Gogan might have said. Shane went 1-5. Brian split the record at 3-3. Colin 4-2. I'm 5-1. But it can all go south from here. Pride cometh before the fall, so I'll say no more about that.
Who put that into this show sheet?
People deserve to know. People deserve to know the truth. I'm only being transparent, and we won't be transparent next week if the standings change. So we kick off with start with Saturday's game, the 9:30 game on Saturday, Texans at Ravens. Brian, repeat of a week 1 game. That was CJ Stroud's first in the league. Ravens have obviously been in a very different place since then. Texans have been anywhere but up since then. It's been a great season for them. They're the team playing with house money here. Ravens are the team that have been resting. We've alluded a couple of times to the nightmare of 2019 and how they sat their starters, got the break, got the bye, and then got turned over by the Titans. And they say they've learned from that. Harbaugh says he's learned from that. Lamar Jackson says, come on, that was my first time in the playoffs. I'm a different quarterback. There's a lot of things that are different in Baltimore and a lot of the good things that are the same. But the fact that, a team comes in cold against a team that's hot, the analytics people will tell you that momentum doesn't matter. But a rookie quarterback who's got his first playoff win under his belt, the belief and the confidence that flows through the Texans' veins, that's a different thing altogether.
Yeah, but I also am conscious that when you look at their home form as opposed to their away form over the course of the season, and whilst they've had some good away victories, it's not at the same level as they are at home. At home, there's a great comfort level of playing in Houston. They seem to be obviously up there in terms of the numbers offensively. On the road, they're averaging 19 points a game. And the first weekend finished 25-9. Like the two teams, I actually went and looked at the highlights of that game this week, and I was looking at some key notes from the game. But they're very different teams. Like in that particular game, Lamar had a really difficult game. He couldn't handle the Houston front seven. They got at him all night. We've seen over the course of the season how the offense has evolved. Like in that particular game, you didn't have the Odell Beckham doing a lot. You didn't have the rookie Flowers doing a lot, but obviously over the course of the season, that's transpired completely different to where they are. And CJ Stroud played okay in that game. It's kind of inevitable people will look back in that game. I don't think is really relevant to where both teams are. I was looking at 2 games, where they've really struggled on the road, and they lost in New York. They lost on the road against the Jets. They really struggled in that game. And there's another one which escapes me now where they lost. Carolina actually lost.
They lost the Panthers. That's right, yeah.
Lost 9-7 to the Panthers, and they didn't get anything going on offense. That kind of thing kind of scares me because they are prone to, whilst the offense has been really expansive in the last couple of games, they are prone to go on the road and lay an egg. But like they only turned the ball over 6 times on the road this year. They can't turn the ball over in this game. They've got to keep with the Ravens. I think that it's difficult. I was looking at some of the stats over the last 10 years in terms of this is where the home teams tend to come to the fore, this divisional round. The last 10 years, 40 games, 29 home victories. the split is usually 3 home wins for the weekend, 1 road team. So it's just interesting to see where that road victory comes this weekend. I don't think it's going to be in Baltimore. I think whilst it's a great storyline, I think it's come to an end. The Ravens are going to be fresh and ready to move on to the championship game. It's the Ravens for me.
And I'm looking at the QuinnBet odds on this one, Brian, and the line is, I think this is the biggest line of the weekend, if I'm not mistaken. No, sorry, it's matched. It's the same in the Packers 49ers game, which is actually quite interesting. I didn't think that spread would be
9.5, 9 to 9.5. Yeah,
9 to 9.5 points. So the money line there would be Ravens 9 to 2 on, Texans 10 to 3. So in a 2-horse race, it's fairly clear what the expectation is from a betting point of view. Colm, if the Texans go out here, that there won't be any disgrace, but I very much doubt that D'Amico Ryans is viewing it that way. You know, the thing is, and we talked about this when Joe Burrow was making his great run with the Bengals, it's very easy for people to say, oh, he's really young, CJ Stroud, there'll be plenty of opportunities. That's not the way the NFL works for anyone other than maybe Tom Brady. You've got to take the most of these chances when they come around.
Yeah, you do. Have a look at the Eagles. You know, it looked like the Eagles were all set, and now they're all at sea. And there's a meeting tomorrow. Let's see if Sirianni still has a job after that. But this Texans team is magnificent, and I mean everything about CJ Stroud, I think, is like all the perceived wisdom around the QB position he has dispensed with. He's come in, and from the first moment he took to the field, he has looked majestic. He has elevated his wide receivers. There was this notion, hello Falcons, build the team and drop the QB in, and that's how you can be successful. You can do that if you have Kyle Shanahan. If you have one of the truly great, certainly, top 10 offensive minds that we've ever seen in the game. And, arguably better than that. But CJ Stroud comes in, he elevates Collins, he elevates Tank Dell, he makes them look, and his adjustments, the way he plays, he is fantastic. But the thing is, he's going up against a Ravens defense who are the opposite of the defenses that went out last week. The Browns, who basically said, we play this way, we figure we've got the talent to beat you. The Ravens don't do that, and they have the talent to do that, but they come up with game plan after game plan after game plan. And I think ultimately, to me, that will be the difference. I do think can the Texans win? I think they can. I don't think it would be a shock if they were. The surprise, yeah, because I would say the Ravens should win. They've ended up with the number 1 seed. The only losses came against divisional rivals. I think you need to have a rage and a fire inside you in order to beat this Ravens team that comes from seeing them every year, twice a year. I think this could be a very, very competitive game, but I think ultimately I'm going to side with the Ravens to get it done. And there is that caveat. I don't think the Texans will be happy to have gone out if they do go out. But if I was Bobby Slowick, I would stay there next year. I do what Ben Johnson did, and I would stay there because in CJ
and what
Stroud,
Brian Callahan did in Cincinnati as well. You
Yeah.
don't get the opportunity to work with guys like that often. It's exciting.
No. And he's not going to be the top pick this year, but my goodness, if he had another year like it next year, I know it's going at the right time, but do it for another year, and then you'll have your pick.
What's that graphic that people are sharing from 2013? It's the Commanders coaching staff where they had McVay, LaFleur, Slowick, Shanahan. There's somebody else as well. There's one other person I'm missing, but oh my God, that's just absolute negligence to have contrived to let all that talent and institutional knowledge fly out of the building. Anyway, after all that said, Colm and Brian, I can see a path for the Texans to win. I can. Having watched the Browns game last weekend, you see the difference between teams that we think have great defensive units based on how they've performed in the regular season, and a team that actually has a great defense, which I think Baltimore does. I think probably that's where this is going to be won and lost. I think they're able to contain the damage probably a lot better than we've seen other teams cope, certainly than the Browns did last weekend. What gives me pause for thought here, even with the Texans catching 9 points here as a significant underdog, is just what you've said there, Colin. This is a quarterback who elevates everything around him, and he's got coaching around him. He's got D'Amico Ryans and Bobby Slowick, who've done the very best that they could with the resources available to them, who very quickly got this team winning and used to winning, which is no mean feat considering where they'd come from. You know, we were looking at the draft and we were looking at the talent that they had around them, and, you know, pieces like Nico Collins and Tank Dell, and going, oh, that's not going to be enough. That's too little to have around a quarterback who's going to be in developmental mode, and they're really going to struggle. People questioned the Will Anderson pick, saying, oh, is that really the pick you wanted to make right now? Surely there were other areas of concern you should have addressed. But you know, Nick Caserio, who was kind of being derided a couple of years ago, is now looking like one of the better executives in the league in terms of what he's assembled, in terms of the coaching team he's put in there. Coaching matters. We say it all the time. And, you know, having him in the quarterback position matters. Texans have both those teams. That means they're not out of any fight. I don't know if it's going to be as quite as one-sided as the betting line suggests. I do think the Baltimore Ravens, so we're going full house there, I think are going to come out on top, which brings us to the end of our first segment of the show, brought to you by RuPoints, demonstrating the value of global PR and comms. See how RuPoints can help your business at rupoint.com. Well, we move into our second segment of games, game picks rather, for the divisional round, and we look at the late game on Saturday night / Sunday morning, the 1:15 kickoff, where the Packers travel to Santa Clara to Levi Stadium to take on the 49ers. Brian, the Packers will tell you that they really owe the 49ers one. 49ers fans will tell you we have Green Bay's number. What way does this one end up?
It's one of those games where a couple of weeks ago, if you were told this was the divisional round game and the Packers are going to go on the road into Santa Clara, you would have said, okay, that's exactly what the 49ers will want. They'll happily take a team which is found their way into the playoffs as a 7th seed, and the expectation is that the 49ers will run them ragged. And
first time a 7th seed has won in the wild card round. I know there's only a relatively small sample size, but the 7th seed has never upended the 2 seed before.
Only the Cowboys could
drive to make that happen.
Yeah, keep McCarthy in. But look, we spoke a couple of weeks ago. I don't recall when the Cardinals played the 49ers at home, and we spoke about the nature of how, in terms of the run game which the Cardinals put up on them, they ran the ball up and down the field on them. And then we've seen other teams do it. You saw the Ravens do it on Christmas night in a similar scenario. They gave them a real kind of struggle defensively in terms of stopping the rush. And what we saw last week from the Packers was concerning in the sense of, if that's the way 49ers are playing at the moment in terms of allowing teams to run the ball on them, is Aaron Jones going to be benefiting from another strong week? What I would say is that, having looked at some of the content from the 49ers this week, and we spoke on Monday around how the Cowboys changed their game plan last week to go from a man-to-man defense to a zonal defense because of the nature of so many attacking-minded players on the Packers. The 49ers have been comfortably playing in zone all season long, so you would expect Shanahan to have derived the plan how to manage that defensively. I think the key in this one, it's probably kind of similar to where we said last week, is can the Packers offensive line hold up to allow Love to do damage and get out of the pocket on the perimeter? He doesn't stay mobile in the pocket, which we saw last Sunday, and it worked perfectly last weekend. The Cowboys couldn't get to him, and when they did, it was 9 times out of 10. It seemed to be obvious too late. This 49ers front obviously can really put pressure on a quarterback. It'd be interesting to see if they can handle them. I think the Packers can play from behind. If we see a scenario where the 49ers get out to a head start, a jump lead, 10-point lead, I think that's when it becomes a struggle, because they will have to throw continuously to get back into the game and not rely on Aaron Jones as much. But I think I'd lean more on if you're asking me which one of the two games on Saturday night I think can be the turnover, I think it's more like to be the Texans as it is to be the Packers. I think the 49ers are primed to go to the Super Bowl, and I think this is the first leg of that eventuality. They're going to win this game, and I think they will cover that 9.5 point spread. With Quimby, I think they win by 10+.
Yeah, it's an interesting game for me because I think you have two teams on the NFC side of the draw who both thought they were going to be playing the Cowboys and both wanted to play the Cowboys at some point. Both the 49ers and the Lions were were lining that one up from some time out. The Lions felt like they were really hard done by, and the infamous 2-point conversion snafu earlier this season, they had beef with Dallas and they wanted to put that to bed. The 49ers, on the other hand, we saw what they did to Dallas when they played them earlier this season. They were probably the ones who really started to sow the seeds of doubt in them when they shellacked them in a game earlier on this season, and they would have felt very confident if that had transpired, that matchup had transpired. Not in this round. I think that they would have thought that might have been the championship game for them, effectively giving them a pass to the Super Bowl would have been how they would have viewed it. Now, that might be slightly dismissive of Dallas's chances, but certainly I think San Francisco really fancied that matchup. This is probably the worst matchup they could have possibly contrived to end up with in the divisional round. You have a team that has evolved through the season, so you're not necessarily sure what you're going to get. You have a team that's really well coached. You have a quarterback who's taken leaps and bounds in what effectively is his rookie season, given how long he sat behind Aaron Rodgers for. You have, defensively, again, players who've evolved and grown week on week. So what you saw on week 6 or 7 from the Packers, and what you maybe even saw as recently as when they dropped that game against New York, Brian, which was causing a lot of people to have doubts about them, is not necessarily what you're going to see now. I mean, they went into the Dallas game, to me, with a plan right down to the coin toss. And the formula for them to win last weekend, to me, is similar to the formula they need to win this weekend. And it's the same for any underdog team. Get the ball early, put a couple of scores on the board, and let the 49ers chase the game and see what they've got. I think, to your point, if Green Bay falls behind early, that's a very difficult prospect for any team in Santa Clara playing the Niners. I don't think the Niners come in here with bulletproof confidence, given what Baltimore did to them in their building. They know they have flaws and they have things to address, and maybe they know as much as we know that perhaps they're not the best team in the league and they've got work to do. Depends on what they've done since they rested their starters for the final week of the season. Have they really put in the work, and have they addressed the things that they needed to address? Knowing Shanahan, he's got all sorts of fresh stuff cooked up, and he'll need to have, because LaFleur on the other side will be bringing his best stuff. Joe Barry hit another level at the weekend against the Cowboys, a guy that people were calling to be run out of town on a rail, the defensive coordinator, and it looked like the Packers were in the position that we've seen them in so many times before, coming in with the offense humming and just hoping that the defense would get it together. Well, they did get it together against Dallas. Big question is, how much of that was Green Bay being superb, and how much of that was just how badly Dallas fell apart once they fell behind? I think you're doing Green Bay a disservice by saying it was all about Dallas collapse, because it's certainly not the case. And some of the throws in particular we saw from Love off the back foot under pressure, guys in his face, were just unreal, and showed you that he very much is the man, or is certainly doing a very good impression of him right now. I think the Niners defense gets to him more often, and they'll need to. I think they only gave up 1 sack last weekend, as you said, Brian. The Packers offensive line did a really good job. I think they'll need to step up again on that for this weekend. That'll be probably what the Niners will see as the key to success. I do think it's a San Francisco win, but I'm actually excited to see what Green Bay does. I'm putting aside my Bear prejudice, because this is a really exciting team, and this is probably the matchup I'm going to enjoy most over the weekend. I think it's Niners on top. Colin, what do you reckon?
So Shanahan is 0-2 against LaFleur in the playoffs. Brock Purdy threw for over 4,000 yards. Christian McCaffrey has over 2,000 yards total. Brandon Ayuk over 1,300 yards. George Kittle over 1,000. Deebo Samuel over 1,000 total. They are a machine. They have, as I have repeatedly said, they have the best starters in the entirety of the NFL. They have one of the truly great play callers that we have seen in the entirety of the league. And they are at home. They are the number 1 seed. But Dan Whelan and the Green Bay Packers are going to shock the world. They are going to win, and they are going to, Brian talked about it earlier, there is always a road team that wins. It's going to be the Packers. The Niners are going to fall, unfortunately for them. Kyle is going to be left to sweat. He's going to spend the next 8 months simmering over it. They're going to make another change at QB. I just think it's set up. Sometimes things don't make sense. Lamar does not have the numbers, but he is the MVP. The Bills made a change at OC. The numbers have been worse, but they have been much better. The Packers are not as good a team as the San Francisco 49ers, but they are going to win there on Saturday night in Santa Clara.
Okay, I like it.
Connor. We need to nip something in the bud here. So, like, Ronnie Whelan, I believe, is from that general direction area where Colin lives, and now he's forgone Ronnie, and he's jumping into the Dan Whelan family tree. He's I wonder where that jersey came from. He's well in that Whelan family.
I want a huge thank you to the Whelan family for the jersey. It arrived just in time. I was hoping I might have it for last weekend, but no, it arrived in time for this one. Look at that, Whelan 19.
And in honor of the jersey, Colin very much taking a punt this weekend. You got to hand it to him.
Colin, before we move on, sorry, Connor. Fred has just arrived. So if you want to show Fred that jersey again, because Fred will be brewing, especially with the McCarthy news.
Fred unfortunately didn't see enough of Dan Whelan last weekend because the Packers, I don't think, had to punt in the entire game. Did they?
Is that PTSD for Fred?
I know he's all about McCarthy. There's a Whelan and a McCarthy. There you go. There's the shock. Yeah, you didn't see that coming, Connor.
No, I did not. It very much was a shocker. Well done, Colin. Right, we move on to the Sunday games now. 8:00 kickoff. The more palatable one from a bedtime point of view for Irish fans is the Bucks at Lions, Brian. An old school NFC Central matchup. Remember the days. Older fans will remember when Tampa and Dallas, or Detroit rather, used to be in the same division. Again, Bucks playing with house money here, so another dangerous team that people didn't necessarily expect in the divisional round, not the matchup that the Lions expected in the divisional round. There's a couple of ways this could go. You could look at it as being a dangerous one for Detroit, who had a huge sigh of relief and an explosion of joy after winning their first home playoff game in over 30 years at the weekend. Everybody in the building, place rocking, electric atmosphere, hugely emotional. Big time performance from Jared Goff winning the matchup against Matthew Stafford. Huge point to prove for him. This is a different one, and if Baker is feeling dangerous, you could be in trouble. We've seen that the Lions have flaws. Do they get exposed by Tampa this weekend?
This has let down written all over, hasn't it? Like the Lions we spoke about, I think before the game was played last weekend, obviously we were aware that if they had it, because obviously the earlier game with the Cowboys losing, that if the Lions were to win, they get another home game and essentially a great opportunity to be in the championship game. And like the Lions fans' expectations have gone above and beyond, and rightly so to be enjoying it. But now they've got a real serious opportunity to go into a championship game. And the way the offense has played over the course of the season, no matter who they play with, it's if they were to get through to play the Packers or even go on the road again to the 4th, they'll put up it. They'll give them a game. This is another rerun of the season. These played each other in week 6, 26 victory for the Lions. Got through for 355 yards. It was lit from the run game, and that was at the stage of the season in which we were really only, I suppose, tipping the toe in terms of seeing Jahmyr Gibbs come in. We saw week 1 he didn't do a lot in Kansas City. It took him a long while to get going, but once they got going, as a combination, Montgomery and Gibbs have been fantastic. We spoke about it last week, and I wouldn't even say it was the most efficient run game they had last week. Early in the first half, they were getting things going, but in fairness to Raheem Morris and the Rams, they managed to kind of come up with a game plan in the second half. There was only 81 yards of offense from the Lions in the second half. That kind of scares me that a team can be adjusted so quickly just to go from a first half where they're 3 for 3 in the red zone and then they only scored 3 points in the second half. I think if that was the case this weekend, they mightn't find their way to get over the line. They did last weekend. But in saying that, I think Baker Mayfield, we're talking about Baker Mayfield and the Bucs, that I think they've overachieved at this stage. They've won the divisional game. I think you touched on, I think you said it on Monday's show, Connor, if anybody else had been playing the Bucs last weekend, in all likelihood, they probably would have beaten that team. They got the Eagles at a right time. I think we're going to see another historic night for the Lions. I think they win. I was looking at some of the numbers in which Baker Mayfield had in the first game. Little in the run game. He was 2 for 12 and third down. He had to throw 37 times. That's not a recipe for them to go and win this game. If they're reliant on Baker to throw all night, they need to get White involved. I think the Lions defense again finds a way to shut the run game down like they did on Williams last weekend. And the Lions win, and the Lions are in the championship game. And for me, it's a Lions at 49ers championship game Sunday week.
I'm just admiring the restraint from Fred in the comments, saying best of luck to Whelan next weekend, even though he feels a little bit sick saying that. Also, Rory wants to talk to you. Colin Rory Fitzgerald wants to talk to you about the Whelan connection. He also has strong Whelan connection, so I feel a local pint is in order there while you can discuss your 1 degree of separation from Ronnie Whelan, and that's got to happen. But in the meantime, Colin, we got to put you on the spot for your pick in this game.
Yeah, I think you both kind of outlined a lot of the way in which it could play out. I would say that in some ways, like in terms of the Lions, and I was talking to Shane Brennan about this earlier, and Shane is worried that they might lay an egg because they're the Lions. But what I can say, I suppose, is for me is getting the win last week was huge, and I think having to play Stafford actually was fantastic because the focus was really more on that than it was on the fact that it was their first playoff game. But having overcome that, I think that played in to part of it. I think going up against Sean McVay, there is a path, right? There is absolutely a pathway here for the Bucs to upset the Lions, right? Todd Bowles, you blitz, you get pressure on Goff, and Goff goes to pieces. But at the same time, as Brian has outlined, like the running game is so good. If they can protect Goff, and they've done a really good job with that line, then I think they have the firepower. I think the Bucs have been a great story this year. I think given where they were last year, do you remember how they weren't just bad again? They were boring. My God, they were so boring. And I imagine, I think for them, they'll be hoping to run it back. But unlike the Cowboys, things have gone well for the Bucs, but they might be losing their OC. They might be losing their best wide receiver. So they won't want this party to end. I think Baker will continue to throw bombs, and I do think that I suppose the Lions' pass defense is susceptible. I think one of the things that you saw last week was that Puka and for Cooper Kupp, they were able to take advantage outside of the red zone, right? Where there was plenty of green grass, they were able to take advantage. Once it tightened up, it got much more difficult. I think the Bucs might be able to have a better chance in the red zone, but I just don't think they'll get enough chances. I'm going with the Lions, but I think this will be more of a game than maybe some people expect.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Colin and Brian. I mean, just to back up the point you're making there, Colin, like, let's not forget that the Lions got outgained last weekend. The Rams threw for 357 yards. Stafford was 25 of 36 for 367 and 2 touchdowns. Nakua, as you mentioned, Colin, went for 181. And the Lions have had problems with that. They've had receivers run riot on them, and Mike Evans entered the building at the weekend. They're going to need to have a plan for him. Need to have a better plan than the one they had for Puka, because that didn't work at all. And also of concern, the fact that second half for the Lions, I mean, they held on and they made a couple of key stops when they really needed to, and their defense actually stepped up. And their slightly maligned defense, they only put up 3 points after halftime. The running game fell off a cliff. I think that is the key to this on both sides. Tampa Bay, Rashad White is one of those interesting running backs that I think flatters to deceive. He's one of those guys that breaks off a big run every now and then, and it kind of pads his stats. I don't think they have an efficient run game. I don't think he's necessarily the guy you can trust to lean on in these big playoff spots. I think either Baker lights them up and Mike Evans goes off, and they get out in front and they maybe shatter some of that Lions' confidence, which I don't think is going to be easily breached, to be fair to them. Or ultimately, I think the Lions are the better team. They're the more balanced team. They're the more talented team. And I think, they have what we talked about in another context with the Texans. You can't buy or draft confidence and belief. Dan Campbell has made sure that just is running through everything that Detroit does. I don't think they're a team that's going to be happy to rest on their laurels after what they accomplished last weekend. I think that's a monkey off the back. That's a bit of relief. I think they're down to business this weekend, and I fully expect them to take care of it against Tampa Bay, I have to say. Or I think it's a potentially dangerous one. I think it's got banana skin written all over it, Brian, as you say, or potential letdown go. But I don't think that's going to be the case here. I think Detroit marches on to the championship game. What a story that's going to be, and we're going to, by the way, chat about that to Lions fan Aaron Mullally, and we'll have that content up before the weekend as well. It'll be great to get his take, a Michigan man who's only just returned recently from home and can fill us in on what the Detroit Lions run this season has meant to his home state and to the city of Detroit. So very much looking forward to that one. My final game of the weekend column, Chiefs at Bills, and I'm going to go here first because we've been talking about how there's always one road team that wins that upsets the odds at the weekend, and I'm going to nail my colours very cleanly to the mast here. I think it's going to be the Chiefs. I think we've had serious question marks about them. We've had question marks over the Bills as well, it has to be said. I still would be slightly nervous after what I saw last weekend, and their red zone worries in particular, not something that particularly impressed you. The fact that they had to rely on Butker to kick 12 points, they've leaned the whole identity of this team now really is, and it's incredible to say for a team that has Patrick Mahomes and is coached by Andy Reid, but their identity is almost based off Lou Anarumo's defense and how hard they play and how hard they played last weekend. They're going to need them to really step up. Of course they will. They're going to need to confuse Josh Allen, which I think they are Spags rather. What am I talking about? I have Lou Anarumo on the brain. Call him smiling away there. It's Spags is the identity of that team at the moment. I think some of the stuff they did last weekend was just glorious to watch. And if you get the version of Josh Allen that has a bit of brain freeze and weather's going to be cold again, he was clean enough last weekend. Would you bet on Josh Allen being clean here and not throwing a pick against this defense? I wouldn't. Turnovers are going to be key, as they always are in playoff games. One of the oldest cliches in the book. I can definitely see that in Josh Allen's future, given what he's up against. And the Chiefs know how to navigate these games. There's so much made of, well, Mahomes has never had to play a championship game away, and he's never had to win a game on the road and all that sort of stuff. I just think they know their way to navigating these things. I think, the Bills have built this one up so much. Oh, when we get them in our building, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. But you're going to do this and you're going to do that against a team that's won 2 Lombardis over the past couple of years. The Bills really need to show us something this weekend. This is a very much a prove-it game for them. I just think the Chiefs have been there, done that. I wouldn't say they've been slept on because they just haven't been anywhere near their usual standard, but there are signs that they're waking from the slumber at just the right time. I loved what I saw from Rashee Rice last weekend, and I think they've got enough to take this, and I think they're going to start stepping up and shifting through the gears in these playoffs, and I think that starts this weekend. Colin, what say you?
I think there's you've nailed it really, Connor, in terms of like this defense is so impressive. And the piece that I would possibly add to it is that the linebackers, right? The Steelers, were all but kind of pulling lads off the street to play. The Chiefs have Nick Bolton, and Nick Bolton is a thumper. When Nick Bolton hits you, you know about it. You also saw Tyreek Hill having to admit after the game that he got his ass kicked. The way in which they were jamming him up at the line. Spags is in his bag. He's absolutely loving life. Brendan Daly's move to coach the linebackers, I think, suffice to say, that's worked out pretty well for the Chiefs. And of course, you have Patrick Mahomes on top of that, along with Andy Reid, who let's hope his mustache has thawed out at this point. Just to highlight a couple of other things, did not participate for the Bills today. Christian Benford, Bernard, Gabe Davis, Stephon Diggs, Taylor Rapp, Spector. Alongside those limited were Dodson, Douglas, Johnson, and Sam Martin. So that's the Bills injury report. But the one thing, Connor, is while Josh Allen might turn the ball over, it's chaos, Josh Allen. It's not making any sense. He's a man on a mission. He has decided he wants the Super Bowl. He's winning the Super Bowl. And none of it, as I said, the numbers don't back it up. The numbers say this is a worse offense. Josh Allen disagrees, and Josh Allen memes are about to, after this game, I think, enter. Do you remember the Chuck Norris and the Paul O'Connell memes? We are about to enter that territory with Josh Allen after this game. I have Josh Allen somehow leading an improbable, a clumsy, a game where the Bills fans will think that it's over, that it's lost. He's going to do something stupid, but ultimately they'll get it right. They'll win it by 2 points. The Bills are going to the AFC Championship game.
That means they won't cover, Brian, because they're 3-point favourites. What do you think?
I would be concerned for the Bills defensively because of the nature of what Colin rightly called it. He kind of stole my thunder on a lot of the people who have not practiced this week. They are banged up considerably. And I know obviously the players are going to play because we're at that stage of the season where they're going to put their bodies on the line. But that doesn't mean necessarily they're 100%. And we may see a Chiefs offense have a little bit more options in terms of what they can go at, because I think they've been quite hamstrung over the course of the last 3 to 4 weeks. But I thought a little bit better last weekend in the cold. I certainly think the weather this weekend is supposed to be a lot better, and I don't think it's going to impact on either quarterback. I think both quarterbacks will be out there throwing considerably, because neither team really have what's Pacheco is a really strong running back. I don't think they have the greatest run team. So I think this is very much going to come down to which defense steps up the most. I think the Bills defense at the moment, because of the nature of all the injuries, can do that. And I also see that they've signed the punter. It doesn't look like Martin the punter is going to play. And sometimes special teams in games can also be a considerable factor as to who comes out on top. My selection for the Super Bowl at the start of the season, I know you two guys are out of the picture there. I'm still hanging in for dear life. My selection was the Chiefs and 49ers to play in Vegas come February. So for that reason, I'm staying with the Chiefs. I think the Chiefs navigate a victory like you, Connor. I think they somehow find a way. And you're right in what you said the other day. For years on end, they've been going into Kansas City, and it was always this kind of conversation. If only the game was in Buffalo. Well, the game is in Buffalo now, so this is your time, Josh Allen. But I think, yet again, we're going to see Patrick Mahomes dig it out and get a win for the Chiefs.
All right, we shall see. That is our divisional round preview. As we say, best football weekend of the year for me. No argument. It's a hands down, just cavalcade of great teams, great football, no make weights, and we're really looking forward to it. We'll be back with you very soon.